Welcome to the Orange County Forum, where newsmakers keep you informed about local, national, and global issues that impact Orange County today.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Henry Mendoza. I'm the president of the Orange County Forum. Welcome. I know we're excited to hear our speaker today, with keeping with our mission to present the opportunity to hear people talk about current events and things that are going on firsthand here in Orange County. We have Chief Executive Officer of CKE Restaurants Holdings, Inc., Mr. Andy Puzder.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Henry, thank you very much. And I want to thank the Board of Directors of the Orange County Forum, and in particular the Executive Director, Nancy Dooley, for hosting this event today and having me here to speak. And I decided that I would try and talk about how the government-centric policies that we're having to deal with over the last few years are really demeaning America's individual entrepreneurial spirit. Now, perhaps the biggest factor, and one of the most publicized laws, certainly, that's working in this respect currently, is the Affordable Care Act, which I call Obamacare. I think the president said it was okay to call it Obamacare. I don't do it to be offensive. He said, I'm Obama and I care. And, you know, I thought that was pretty smart. I mean, I think that's, he's bought into this law. He believes in it. And I'm not here to question his motives today. I may question his policies and how they would actually work, but certainly not the man or the man's motives. And he calls it Obamacare, so I'm going to call it Obamacare. But at the federal level, at least, this is probably the most misguided policy that we have from a business perspective at the moment. And I've written about this in a number of periodicals. I wrote an article in December of 2011 for Bloomberg that said that Obamacare would destroy jobs for Americans, that we had to pay for Obamacare somehow. And what people were going to do was cut back on job creation, on starting new jobs and new businesses. In July of 2013, I wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal warning that young people wouldn't sign up for the insurance, which has turned out to be true. I wrote an article that October saying that it would cause businesses to put people under 30 hours, creating massive part-time jobs where we formerly had full-time jobs, which has also come about. Then last month, I guess I finally gave up and just wrote an article that said, will you stop defending this law? It's just not defensible anymore, particularly after some testimony we had from the Congressional Budget Office head, a gentleman named Elmendorf, who I'll talk about in a minute. So rather than pick on particular issues about Obamacare today, I thought I'd discuss how it really fits into our nation's much broader economic picture. I want to take a look at the damage it's doing already to the economy in a broader context, even before its most damaging provisions are coming into effect. And despite the administration's questionable executive delays and various amendments, including one yesterday, where they actually delayed for 2 years the requirement that health policies meet the requirements of Obamacare. So we're now delaying even the requirement that health policies comply with the law, not only that businesses don't have to comply. So how does all of this impact the economy? Well, there are many measures of economic growth or economic decline, and you're probably tired of hearing about most of them because they keep coming up in the news all the time. The most important one in my mind is called the labor participation rate. Now, that sounds really boring and probably puts half of you to sleep just hearing me mention it. But so what I've done is, with the help of my friend Jeff Chasney, who's our head of IT, we put together this really kind of exciting, if not terrifying, chart. We call it the Obama curve. What does this chart show? And obviously the Obama curve is a play on my buddy Art Laffer's Laffer curve, which is much more encouraging, but it tries to get across the same sort of economic idea. What does it show? First, this chart shows the labor participation rate over the last 36 years in the United States, as reported monthly by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or BLS. So you're asking, okay, I can see the chart. Why is that important? And Why do the ups and downs of the labor participation rate matter to me? Why do they matter to our economy? Well, first of all, what is it? The BLS defines labor participation as the percentage of the population over 16 years of age, so if you're under 16, you're not in, that's available for work. You're not in jail, you're not in the Army, you're available to work, and you are either working, you have a job, or you're actively looking for a job. So you could be employed or unemployed. If you're unemployed, you have to be actively looking for a job, which means you looked for a job in the last 30 days. Okay. As this chart demonstrates, what this chart demonstrates is the percentage then of the entire population that's in the labor force. So you're either working or you're actively looking for a job. And it has declined during President Obama's presidency, during this administration, at an unprecedented and precipitous rate. You can kind of see where Jimmy Carter was president back in yellow, and then Ronald Reagan, the first Bush, and then Bill Clinton comes in, and it kind of hangs in there. Then it goes up with the dot-com boom and Clinton's policies, and then it comes down when the dot-com boom died. It levels out during the Bush administration. It starts to go down just before he leaves, and then really falls off a cliff. We're now back to 63%, which we last saw in March of 1978 during the Carter administration. I was in law school at the time, so it's sort of a welcome back Carter experience. But it's an important number. How important is labor participation? Well, with great candor, Douglas Elmendorf, who is the director of the Congressional Budget Office, which is a nonpartisan, so it's not Democrat or Republican, liberal or conservative. It's a nonpartisan office in Congress, the Congressional Budget Office. He recently testified before the House Budget Committee and stated that, quote, "The labor participation rate is the central factor in slowing economic growth." Later in that same testimony, he stated, quote, "Later in this decade and beyond, the principal reason why we think economic growth will be less than it was for most of my lifetime will be a slower growth by the labor force." In other words, labor participation is critically important. These are the people that are either working or looking for jobs, right? So these are the people that are productive. They find jobs, they're the productive element in society. As the percentage they represent of the overall population declines, our productivity declines. As we become less productive, our nation is less prosperous. So it's critically important. In fact, this is the principal reason our children's economic futures, and I have 6 kids and 6 grandkids, so I'm concerned about that. And we have students back here. It's the principal reason our children's economic futures appear far dimmer than ours. Slower declining growth in the percentage of people working or actually looking for work both condemns our youth to economic stagnation and deprives them of the opportunities that come with prosperity and a job. The key question is why? Why is the labor participation rate declining at such an amazingly steep, precipitous rate? We need to understand the root of the problem if we're ever going to have a chance to reverse it. Now, the president's defenders argue that this decline is due to baby boomers retiring and leaving the labor force, rather than the president's economic policies. And I think this argument simply misses the point for 2 reasons. One is, again, going to the Congressional Budget Office, which is neither liberal nor conservative, Republican nor Democrat, the CBO attributes labor force participation rates decline 50% to economics, that's poor job prospects in the current economy, and 50% to demographics, which is the aging of the population. So we're, one side's half right, the other side's half right. But what difference does it make that we can explain the decline if we fail to use that information to reverse the decline? Just because we can explain it doesn't mean we have to accept it. In fact, it's critical to our future and our children's futures that we don't accept this decline and that we reverse it. And we can reverse it. but only by implementing policies that encourage private sector job creation, which increases the demand for labor and thereby increases the cost of labor by increasing salaries and benefits, which incentivizes people to join the labor force. If jobs are available, even people who've retired will re-enter a vibrant labor market. If jobs are available, the people who have dropped out of the labor market saying, you know what, I give up. I looked for a job, I'm tired, I can't find it, there's no good jobs. Those people will re-enter the labor force when good jobs are once again available. So we need economic policies that encourage private sector growth, private sector job creation. It's really that simple. If the private sector is creating jobs, we can turn this around. Unfortunately, the current administration's economic policies, while often well-intended, and as I said, I'm not here to attack their motives, but the policies consistently limit the ability of businesses to create jobs and discourage people from working. Entrepreneurs create jobs. When do they create jobs? Well, when they expand or create businesses, when they can develop a business model that shows their revenues or income, not their sales, right, the money they bring in, exceeds the costs of opening and running the business by an amount sufficient to justify taking the risk of making an investment. You're not going to invest your money and your time and your life if you don't think your business is going to produce enough profit to justify your taking those risks. But it's difficult to develop sufficiently profitable business models when government policies keep increasing the costs of running a business. For example, by increasing marginal tax rates, which we did at the end of last year, on high-income earners, the president has decreased the profits small business owners can invest in growth, because most are organized as sole proprietorships, which means they pay the taxes on their business, or as subchapter S corporations, where you get the protection of having a corporation, but you get the tax benefits of having the corporation's taxes run through yours, so you don't have to pay taxes twice. That's how most small businesses are run. When you raise marginal tax rates on high earners, you raise marginal tax rates on those businesses, and they don't have that cash to invest anymore. Navigating the increasingly complex government regulatory maze has forced businesses, small and large, to spend monies they otherwise could have invested in growth. And we've seen the Federal Register, which I don't know if you've ever seen it. If you're lawyers, you've got walls with the Federal. It's increased by 15,000 plus pages over the past 5 years while this president's been in office. These are money that go to lawyers and accountants, and I realize we have lawyers and accountants in the room, and as a recovering lawyer myself, I'm sympathetic. But quite honestly, most of us have jobs. This is money that could have created new jobs. Fighting a war on carbon fuels, again, not questioning motives, but it increases energy costs, which decreases a new business's ability to generate profits. The cost of fuel impacts more than just people driving. For example, it impacts heat and air conditioning costs, as you well understand, for businesses and individuals. And we have Carl's Jr.'s, we have Hardee's and Carl's Jr. are really the same brand. And we've got restaurants in the Southeast and the Northern Midwest. And I can tell you heating and air conditioning costs this year were extremely high. It also increases the amount of discretionary income that people have to spend when they go to a restaurant or a clothing store or the movies, because as your cost of getting somewhere increases, you have less money to spend once you get there. In our business, and in many businesses, it also increases the cost of what we sell to you, because the food that's delivered to our restaurants is delivered in diesel trucks. Same with the grocery store. And when the cost of delivering that food goes up, the cost of that food goes up. When you're doing a business model to build a restaurant or a grocery store or anywhere where you have product delivered, as the cost of delivery go up, your business model's profits come down. Even anticipated costs discourage profitable business models. Business models, by definition, project in the future. Normally, you project 5 years in the future. So if you anticipate a cost is going to go up, you have to include that in your model, even if it hasn't gone up yet. which is part of the problem with what we're experiencing today. For example, the president is advocating a significant federal minimum wage increase, further increasing labor costs. Businesses have to factor that increase into their models. The CBO recently reported in a different report than the one on Obamacare that the president's proposed minimum wage increase would result in a loss of 500,000 jobs by 2016. And here's why. If you decrease the cost of something, businesses will use more of it. If you increase the cost of something, businesses will use less of it. If you increase the cost of labor, businesses will use less labor. You'll find automation, you'll find hours cut back. We'll do everything we can as business people to keep our costs down. But when you increase minimum wage, you have to factor a cost increase in. When you reduce labor, the labor participation rate declines. Now, it's easy to attack businesses when they employ these cost-cutting measures, but unlike government, which has no competitors, businesses have to generate profits to grow. Businesses that consistently fail to generate profits go bankrupt. But even more disturbing, businesses that can't model, that can't forecast a profit, never open. Increasing minimum wage for some will not help the people who lose their jobs, let alone those who never get a job because the businesses just didn't open. Now, how does Obamacare fit into this scenario? Now, some would say, well, it's another straw on the job-creating camel's back. Well, it's more than that. It's a log, and it's another log. These aren't straws. And every time there's a new policy coming out of Washington, it feels like another log. You may hear some frustration in my voice with this, but this is actually presenting to you as very therapeutic for me. It's much better. It's much better and much less expensive than if I actually had to go and get therapy for these things. But despite promises to the contrary, Obamacare is increasing medical insurance expense and labor costs. It just is. The Obama administration's delays and amendments to Obamacare, and whether the president can do this, we'll find out, because I'm sure much of this will end up in the court. But even with delaying the employer mandate, what you gave businesses was a reprieve. Now, people that run businesses generally aren't stupid. We know these delays are politically motivated. We know they're temporary. So if you're doing a business model, you have to factor these costs in. We know Obamacare's dramatically increased costs are coming, and we have to factor them into business models, which reduces anticipated profits, which reduces growth, which causes the labor participation rate to decline. So in summary, as the cost of doing business rises, profits supporting investment and growth become more difficult to model. Businesses can only absorb so many costs, and as you all know, consumers can only absorb so many price increases. At some point, business models don't work, growth stagnates or declines, and the labor participation rate drops. Now, absent investment and growth, there's diminished job creation, and diminished job creation leads to a declining labor participation rate. It's really that simple. This is not, you don't need a degree from Harvard in economics. As a matter of fact, it probably hurts you. It's very, very simple. If we can create jobs, we can turn this around. If you stop us at every stage, we can't. So businesses have been warning the president that his policies are placing our economic future at serious risk. I'm sure you've heard it on all of the business shows that you listen to, if you listen to any. The CBO recently revealed the other side of that coin, and you may have heard about this. To me, it was a surprise. It reported that over the next 10 years, Obamacare will cause our economy to lose the equivalent of 2.5 million full-time jobs. Because Obamacare, not because they discourage businesses from growing, but because Obamacare encourages people to voluntarily lower their incomes or stop working to be eligible for increased government health insurance subsidies. In other words, it disincentivizes work. Now, testifying in front of the House Budget Committee, Director Elmendorf, remember from the CBO, stated that, quote, by providing heavily subsidized health insurance to people with very low income, and then withdrawing those subsidies as income rises, the act creates a disincentive for people to work relative to what would have been the case in the absence of Obamacare. Now, to the extent these individuals stop working, what happens to the labor participation rate? It goes down. This is no longer part of our productive economy. It just isn't that complicated. But what surprised me was not the fact that Obamacare, by government entitlement programs, look, people that need these programs, but to some extent they can discourage people from working. And to the extent they do that, it's not a positive thing. What surprised, but I never heard anybody defend it before. I've heard people say we need to help the needy, and I'm all over that. I think that's absolutely true. But I've never heard people say people who could work, it's a positive if they don't have to. This is the first time I'd ever really heard anybody defend that. And it really was kind of surprising and disturbing, and I think in retrospect, people will look back at that as a mistake. As I said, we're all sympathetic to the plight of those who are unable to obtain adequate medical care. Anybody that isn't sympathetic to that, I think we all were, we all are. It's difficult to imagine a class of people more in need of our sympathy and our support. These were the individuals we were told Obamacare was going to benefit. But the individuals Obamacare is disincentivizing, as Director Elmendorf discussed, these aren't helpless individuals whose plight the administration used to sell health insurance reform. These people are people with jobs and health insurance who are going to give up their jobs and their current health insurance to get the government subsidies. So they're going to reduce their incomes, or they're going to leave the jobs that they already have so that they can increase the amount that they take from the system. Now, these are people that were paying perhaps income taxes, although down at that level, maybe not, but certainly everybody knows payroll taxes. Everybody pays payroll taxes. Those go to pay for some of these entitlements, including Social Security, but there's also now an Obamacare payroll tax. Those monies are gone, and the people who had those jobs or who reduced those hours will now not be contributing, but will be taking from the other people who actually are working. So what are these people going? Well, you heard on TV, I heard Vice President Biden say, well, a woman who wanted to stop working and take care of her kids could do that. And again, you feel sympathetic to that. I think what he didn't mention was, as Director Elmendorf said, people could see this and they could retire or pursue their hobbies. Hobbies is a quote. And I want to quote from Nancy Pelosi, who stated that they could become a photographer, a writer, a musician, or whatever. You know, it's funny, but in an almost surreal kind of way. There's real injustice in requiring that people with jobs who need to work to support their families are going to subsidize those who choose to be unemployed. This is far different than assisting those that are unable to support themselves. How is it fair for some poor guy in Tennessee? We just heard about the Tennessee Volkswagen plant, the union thing. We got a guy there, working, making, I don't know, $18, $17, $19 an hour to support his family all day with the repetitive job of putting car doors on Volkswagens so he can support his family, send his kids to school, or send her kids to school, or support her family. Now they have to support somebody that wants to stay home and write cowboy poetry. There's just something wrong about that. But it's not the only thing that's wrong. Just as importantly, we need to consider what this law is really doing to the people it's encouraging to give up their jobs and reduce their hours. With those who Obamacare encourages not to work, they may well be better off with respect to health insurance expense. But are they really better off without the independence, the dignity, and the self-respect that come with a job? Is it better to take from them the opportunity to raise their incomes and join the middle class and succeed? Is it better to put them in a position where they can only improve their lives by voting for those who will continue to increase their government benefits funded by the efforts of others? For those who are able to take care of themselves, and again, this is not about those who are unable to take care of themselves. This is where, people that are conservative are always getting, somebody comes in with a picture of a hungry kid, and no matter how good our arguments are, we lose. This isn't about people that are unable to take care of themselves. But for those who are able to take care of themselves, dependence on government largesse is not a form of freedom. It's a form of serfdom that leads only to misery and self-doubt. The things that made you feel good about yourself were the jobs you held, the things you achieved, what you accomplished in your life, what your kids accomplished in their lives. It's not when somebody gave you something. So making people dependent is not a way to free them. It's a way to put them into a form of serfdom. I've watched young men and women enter our labor force. In our restaurants, I've seen the pride and determination that leads to success in their careers and in their lives. Some stay, they move up the management structure in our company, and there's a lot of good management positions in our industry. Others leave. They go into other jobs and other challenges, but they're equipped with the experience you can only get from a paying job. Now, there's a hunger for these opportunities. I had it. I started out in a Baskin-Robbins. My parents didn't help me through college. They didn't help me through law school. I busted up concrete with a jackhammer. I painted other people's houses. I cut other people's lawns, and I'm standing here to tell you I'm damn proud of it. But that hunger is disappearing because there are fewer and fewer part and full-time jobs available in an economy where the labor participation rate is dropping like a rock. Again, we're not talking about the needy. We're talking about people that are able to care for themselves but choose not to do so and to drop out of the labor force. Now, as the Obama curve chart shows, you can't increase labor force participation when your economic policies discourage American entrepreneurs from creating jobs and your social programs discourage Americans from working. The solution to what CBO Director Elmendorf believes is the central factor in slowing economic growth is to reduce the burdens government has placed on growth and release the great American job-creating entrepreneurial spirit. Our founder, Carl Karcher, was emblematic of that. 1941 with a hot dog cart. I met him in 1986, had a $500 million company and an 8th grade education to back it up. This is what we do in America. America's private sector is ready, willing, and able to create jobs for those who are still hungry and seeking the dignity, the self-respect, and the experience that comes with the job. Government has to get out of the way. More government is not the answer to a declining labor force. As this chart and history, both recent and past, demonstrate, too much government is the problem with the declining labor force. Thank you, may God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
The Orange County Forum is brought to you through the generous support of the Orange County Register and our sustaining partners. For more information about the Orange County Forum, call 949-588-9884. The Orange County Forum is a nonprofit organization. Your contributions are tax deductible.